Thank you very much. Just introducing Donald Salop from the Ontario Chamber of Commerce to kick off our Careers Now Discoverability webinar series, episode 1, Understanding Disabilities in Your Workforce Development, and to learn more about the variety of disabilities out there, what to expect in interviews in the workplace, potential accommodations, and myths versus realities. So looking forward to the session. Thank you very much, Donald, and our presenters. And this is another exciting partnership we have through the Careers Now program, which is focused on labor attraction to the food and beverage processing sector. So we have a lot of different partnerships. The Chamber is one of them. It's a very important one, and we've done some work in the past. So we're very keen on this session. I just wanted to add that it is being recorded. So if any of your colleagues weren't able to make this today, please pass along the information to them, and we will have a recording available. We're also available at FBO for any questions, follow-up, things like that, through ourselves or through the partners on the call. Please let us know if you have any follow-up, and very much looking forward to this informative session today and learning more about hiring people with disabilities.
Thank you very much for that introduction and opening to the event, Chris. I am not going to take much time here. I'm just going to let everyone know that you will get a crash course on various disabilities and employment. So specifically what they look like in the workplace, typical accommodations you might see, and myths versus realities. Each disability will be covered in about 10 minutes to provide an overview of the material. Our first speakers will actually be speaking for closer to 20 minutes because they're going to cover both physical disabilities as well as developmental and intellectual disabilities. So I would like to introduce, in no particular order other than the order that they are on that document. I'll just spotlight them here first. Where is Nick? Where did Nick go? There's Nick.
I'm here, Don.
Okay, yes, there you are. So our first speakers are Carolyn McDougall, who is the Project Strategy Lead for Employment Pathways Business Liaison for Project Search Toronto at Holland Bloor View, and is an occupational therapist. I'd also like to introduce Nick Hadjiani, who is the Employment Manager for IBM, ODSP, Join, and Sunrise at Community Living Toronto, as well as they are being joined by Matthias Castaldo, who will be providing a lived experience. So Carolyn already has her screen shared, which is fabulous. You're on top of things. I'm going to mute myself and let you go into your material.
Great, thanks, Donald. And I'll just switch us to our next slide. Matthias is starting us off with some introductory information.
Can everyone hear me okay? Perfect. I just wanted to double check. So thanks again, everyone, for coming on, and thank you for having us. So we just kind of wanted to give a little bit of some background information about the organizations, that we work for. So at Holland Bloor View, we specifically with the employment programs, the youth that participate through the programs are in high school and or will be going into post-secondary, and we focus on summer employment. Typically, the ages range between 15 to 24. And in terms of disabilities or exceptionalities, we service individuals with intellectual disabilities, autism, and physical disabilities. At Community Living Toronto, typically the age for the individuals that go through that program are 18 years or older. Some of the individuals that have been able to get employment are either permanent and or contract, full-time and or part-time. And in terms of the individuals that they service, typically they have intellectual and or developmental disabilities and may also have a secondary disability. Regarding Project Search, typically the students that are going through this program are just finishing high school, and usually students that are able to kind of get a job after are able to get one in a permanent or contract position, and that is full-time and or part-time. And with the students that go through the Project Search program, typically the students have an intellectual and or developmental disability and may also have a secondary disability. So we just kind of wanted to give you kind of a bit of an example of kind of, or sort of demonstrate the importance of kind of, seeing the possibilities, the strengths, and the benefits. So people with disabilities are valued employees in a wide variety of industries and roles. They each have their own strengths, interests, and areas of challenge. And it's very important, I think, or we think, to keep an open mind. So, i.e., do not make any assumptions. If you know one person with a disability, you know that one particular person with a disability. There's so many possibilities and benefits for an inclusive employers. So just to kind of go over some of the images that you see on the screen, if you look on the far left, you'll see an individual or an employee with an intellectual disability who worked at the Cnib as a gatekeeper or as a gate attendant. Moving over to the right, we have, moving to the bottom underneath, you'll see a worker with a physical and intellectual disability, and they were working as an office clerk. We also, if you move over, I think, to the far right, at the top right, I should say, we have a worker with a physical disability who worked.
Sorry, Matthias.
Sorry.
Go ahead.
Yeah. You'll see a worker with a physical and intellectual disability who worked as a Cineplex cast member, so at the cinema, at the movie theater. If you look over to just in the middle, you'll see a worker with an intellectual disability who worked at food services at a senior home. You'll also see the one underneath. You'll see a worker with an intellectual disability who works as a hospital surgery prep assistant. And then just above that, you'll see another worker with a physical disability who worked at Wonderland and is now working at a bank. And then the last photo that you'll see at the bottom right, that's actually me. So I work kind of with Carolyn, and I work at Home Blairview as a youth facilitator, which is one of the lived experience jobs that are available at Home Blairview. And what I do as an individual with a physical disability and a learning disability, my physical disability is cerebral palsy. I share my lived experience in regards to kind of specifically with kind of, going through work and transitioning into school and employment. And I also kind of lead some of the workshops that we do for the programs. So you can see that's kind of what I'm doing in this photo.
Thanks, Matthias. Over to Nick.
Good afternoon, everybody. Thank you, Discoverabilities, Chamber of Commerce, and all other partner organizations that invited us today. So some of the disabilities and about intellectual disabilities, so we're going to talk about some of the strengths, consistently following procedures. They have routine and systemic work, a lot of times on a schedule, and that could be relayed to in pictorials or in a written schedule for them to follow. They're very reliable. Individuals are very dedicated and hardworking, high value work in a team, and love to help others. Common areas of challenge. Sometimes individuals have some challenges in reference to complex math, reading and writing tasks, like examples for some individual to do a cashier position. Benefits from step-by-step tasks, specifically training, including demonstrating feedback or checklists or schedules. If individual the information is hard to understand, key information for long verbal and written explanations, sometimes those are challenging. Planning, organizing, and problem solving in unfamiliar situations, and interpreting nonverbal or unclear social communications. A lot of times this could be dealt with and overcome with small means of interventions with a job coach and an individual to show them how to do the job from the beginning, in breaking down the tasks and showing them step by step in doing a task, breaking it down into a 5 or 10 task job and showing them each task and how it gets done. In reference to accommodations, for examples, in interviews. including a hands-on component, getting a tour, a short work trial, a simulation. Sometimes even in interviews, we ask the employer, which we have a good relationship with, to give us the questions prior so we can prompt the individual in reference to some of the questions. We've also asked for accommodations in reference to us being in the interview, in reference to clarifying some of the communication that's needed in reference to some of the questions, providing information about selection process and the interview and the questions in advance, as I said, welcoming a job coach in the interview if applicable. And those are some of the accommodations that we work towards. Asking concrete questions, not just a yes or no answer, asking questions in reference so they can give some lived experiences. Probing for more details and information if answers are too short. Accommodations at the work site, partnering with employment organizations and job coaches to support the training and the team included. So not just training the individual who's learning how to do the job, but also training employees that are working around them as we fade out from the employment, so they can be your eyes and ears to assist them if any interventions needed, and you can be there within a day or so to assist them with any specific job coach needs. Give clear step-by-step instructions, augment verbal instructions with written or picture checklists. Expect the worker to meet your quality and quantity and other standards. Give clear, timely feedback on performances. If an individual is doing a 7 out of 10, a lot of times giving them a number they may not understand, but letting them know that, you know, you do a fantastic job, positive reinforcement, letting them know that we still have a little bit more work to do to get up to the level with which the employer is looking for. So those are like small different examples of accommodations, either for interviews or at the workplace that we work on, and we partner up and assisting the individuals to be successful.
Thanks, Nick. We thought then we would share an example of an accommodation example, both for this segment on workers with intellectual disabilities, and we have a second one in our second section about physical disabilities. So I was recently supporting a manager who's new to the organization and an employee on her team, which is an environmental services team. The manager could see that the employee is a very dedicated worker and overall doing a good job, but there were some specific areas of challenge she'd reached out about. One was about changes to the schedule for the day, which of course sometimes has to happen, in particular if an employee is covering for another employee's absence, and you know, it can involve changes like changes to lunchtime. So the manager had shared with me recognizing that lunch is really important to the worker, and said he gets upset and asks a lot of questions if I have to change his lunchtime. So I've just stopped changing his lunchtime, which maybe sounds like a well-meaning accommodation, but wasn't actually necessary and might not even really be very easy to maintain. So in talking, we talked through, certainly the worker does appreciate routine and feels a bit worried when there is a change because he does really want to make sure he's doing a good job. But the manager was interpreting his questions as him being upset when really he was just double checking. The only accommodation he really needs is for her to highlight or circle the changed lunchtime on his daily schedule and say something like, your lunch is at a different time today, 12:30 instead of 12. Potentially a little bit of extra information like, because John is away, and then be available to answer a couple of his questions. So we hope that this example illustrates that many accommodations are very simple, and it can be helpful working in partnership with an employment services organization or a coach for training, or if there's some challenges arising on the job. Also hope it touches on the importance of thinking about workplace priorities and standards and the needs of the employee so that there can be a reasonable and sort of mutually workable accommodation for the long term. I'm going to speak a little bit about workers with physical disabilities then as well too. So physical disabilities may be present from birth or may be acquired over the course of any of our lifetimes. And I think because part of an individual's experience on a day-to-day basis, many individuals with physical disabilities feel that they do a lot of adapting, finding creative solutions, and advocating ongoingly. so that strengths like persistence, innovative thinking, and communication skills are things people point to. Some areas of challenge or things that we may notice. So a physical disability may affect one or more of mobility or doing things with one's hands, so dexterity or endurance or speech. It's important to note that physical disabilities may fluctuate in their impacts from day to day, from part of the day to another part of the day, over a period of weeks or over the course of a longer period of time. And so some individuals with physical disabilities use a mobility device like a leg brace or a walker, or may have a communication system that they use. But it is also important to think about physical disabilities are not always visible. We sometimes think that they are, but they may not be. So to share a little bit about accommodations, I often think about the fact that workers with disabilities in general may not have had the same number of experience opportunities. And this can be a barrier, first off, to getting an interview in the first place, and then to answering questions well in an interview. So in general, in human resources practice, many other methods are perhaps better than interview-based questions, but we really find if employers can provide some detail about, first off, the interview process and also the roles, the required tasks, the skills, what the day-to-day would look like, then the applicant can much more easily imagine what the job will be like and provide relevant examples, perhaps from past work experience or from relatable school experience. So we find it really important to think broadly about what kinds of experience might be relatable. And as in our previous section, certainly like a work trial opportunity can be very helpful. In terms of accommodations at work, I think it's great when employers ask all employees, what can we do to support your best performance in this job? And important to ask more than once, because a really good accommodation is a process much more than a single point in time when someone is onboarded and first joins the organization. I think also anytime that managers can share information about how they want something to be done, as well as what the outcomes or results are that they expect, that also can really help workers who may have a bit of a gap in their experience and may not be so much able to draw on past experience and thinking through how to do something as they get used to the way things are done in certain organizations. And as Nick previously shared, clear, timely feedback on performance helps all workers, and welcoming a job coach or an employment support organization, if there is one involved, can be helpful as well. So to share an example from my long ago work experience, one of my first roles after school was I was working in human resources, and we had a worker with a physical and a learning disability join our team who was linked with an employment agency. We used to store all of our paper employee files in these really tall filing cabinets, 5 drawers up, and they were stored by department, not alphabetically. So the new employee could not access the upper drawers and actually was finding it really challenging to memorize which of hundreds of employees were in which drawer. So very simply, we reorganized our cabinets to use the bottom 3 drawers in a longer section, and we stored supplies that we didn't use very much in the upper cabinets. And really the result of this change was that the employee was able to find the files, which was the major part of his job, but actually everybody on the team was able to find files much more quickly and without using step stools. So it was definitely a big win. And so hopefully this example illustrates that accommodations can mean a very simple change to how something is done. It does often benefit everybody. And really what it mainly requires is an open mind. I think I'm switching to Matthias just for a wrap up. Sorry, the green is just showing the slight difference in how we reorganized.
Thanks, Carolyn. So just to kind of, we thought we kind of just provide a few kind of tips for this. So very kind of quickly, first of all, the FBO is engaged in education in these sessions kind of with Discoverability Network. But it's also important, I think, to educate oneself about the business case for hiring, partner with employment organizations, develop clear, accurate position descriptions, and inclusive in your recruitment, and be inclusive in your recruitment and selection procedures. Be systematic in your approach for training, welcome accommodation discussions at any stage of the employment relationship, and be open to learning and thinking outside the box about how things are done. And often, just to kind of conclude, a specific change to accommodate a worker with a disability improves things for all. And a diverse and inclusive workforce, it's more engaged, and it is a business advantage.
Thanks, Matthias. So that's it for us, really. I'll just put our contact informations up on the screen for a little bit and turn it back over to Donald. Thanks for having us.
Oh, it's our pleasure. Thank you for that presentation. That was a lot of information in a short period of time, which was the plan. So much obliged for finding a way to get all of that in there. I appreciate you putting your contact information on the screen. Also, we will be following up with some information from our presenters afterwards that Isabel can distribute to FBO members. So you will also have it in another form directly in your inboxes. So moving on to our next presenter, we are going to welcome Shar Zozolato. Whenever I find her on the screen here, there she is. All right. Shar is an employment facilitator with the Geneva Center for Autism, and unsurprisingly, she'll be speaking about autism and neurodiverse job seekers. So Shar, please go ahead.
Thanks, Donald. I'm excited to be here today and part of this important discussion. Again, I'm Shar, and I'm going to be talking about autism in the workplace. I'd also like to introduce a little bit about the Geneva Center for Autism. Our mission is to empower individuals with autism and their families to fully participate in their communities. Each year, we provide direct service to over 3,000 autistic children, youth, and adults, and respite for over 400 families annually from across Toronto and the GTA. We also provide training for companies, families, teachers, and professionals through our in-house workshops and webinars, just like this, and also via our e-learning platform, Sonderly, which we launched in 2019. So our agenda today includes an overview of autism, common myths and misperceptions, understanding autistic neurodiverse employees, accommodations and adjustments in the workplace, and if time, an example of a job coaching support for both an autistic employee and their employer. So what is autism spectrum disorder? Autism spectrum disorder, sometimes referred to as ASD or simply autism, is a lifelong neurodevelopmental condition that affects how people perceive the world and interact with others. Autistic or neurodiverse people have difficulty in varying degrees with social interaction, verbal and nonverbal communication, restricted and repetitive behaviors. Because autism is a spectrum, each person with autism has a distinct set of challenges and strengths. Autism knows no bounds, so there's no association or correlation to ethnicity, race, social economics, or geographical location. And despite extensive research, definitive causes or cures remain unknown. So some common myths and misperceptions. Autism is caused by vaccines. Simply not true. A 1998 study linking autism with vaccines has been retracted, and numerous studies continue to confirm that there's no direct evidence that links vaccines to the development of autism. Autistic people are all the same. It is a spectrum for a reason, which means that autistic people may share similar challenges and characteristics. However, each autistic individual experiences and presents these differently. Like the saying goes, If you've met one person with autism, you've met one person with autism. It's too costly for employers to hire autistic neurodiverse people. According to a study by the Job Accommodation Network, otherwise known as JAN, 57% of employers reported no additional costs from hiring neurodiverse employees. And if costs were incurred, companies reported spending less than $500 as a one-time expense. It also should be noted that not every autistic or neurodiverse person requires accommodations. And employers have to change the requirement of the job to fit autistic employees. If the employee with autism was hired based on their skills and abilities, then there are zero reasons to change the job description. Accommodations and adjustments do not take away job responsibilities or tasks from autistic employees. Rather, changes might be needed with how the work is completed in order for employees with autism to do the job to the best of their abilities. So understanding autistic neurodiverse employees, there is no standard type or profile of an autistic employee. However, autistic individuals have some common characteristics that can affect them differently and to varying degrees in the workplace. So for example, maybe some common challenges might be with social communication and interaction. So this can look like maybe abruptly terminating or interrupting conversations, lack of spontaneous conversation, or being unable to understand facial expressions and body language. So those assume social cues in those social environments. Sensory issues. So there could be sensitivities to sights, smells, sounds, and touch. So these sensitivities can lead to sensory overload, exhaustion, or burnout. And that's really depending on how they can affect the individual. Organization and planning. So some individuals can have difficulty prioritizing tasks, time management for completing tasks, or being able to deal with unexpected changes to the day. Literal thinking. So differentiating between what words actually mean and what we want them to mean when chatting with others. Things like figures of speech, jargon, or idioms can sometimes be hard to decipher what the intended meaning was. So if you're thinking about like things like raining cats and dogs, or when you're explaining something, you're saying, you know, wearing many hats as examples. Co-occurring conditions like anxiety, depression, or OCD, they can sometimes lead to further challenges as well. But on the flip side, from an ability strength-based perspective, you'll most likely observe keen attention to detail. So being focused on tasks and easily identifying errors, complete honesty, so telling it like it is type of honesty, rule abiding and routine driven, so adhering to workplace procedures as directed. And some individuals actually enjoy completing repetitive tasks or having the same daily routine as it eases their anxiety of the unknown. Reliability, conscientiousness, and persistence, so being punctual, and decreased absenteeism has been reported by companies who have hired autistic employees. Thinking outside the box, so adding a neurodiverse viewpoint and diversity to your team and to the workplace. So some examples of accommodations or adjustments, you know, from the whole employment cycle, so hiring to retention. This is not an exhaustive list, but a few processes and procedures that can be easily modified so companies can be more accessible and welcoming to autistic neurodivergent job seekers. These are also helpful as some supports to some of the challenges that were just addressed in the previous slide. So thinking about the hiring process, An inclusive job description. Use plain language, be clear and concise. So I know we heard that in the earlier presentation as well. Also be open to friendly formats of how to apply for open positions, and indicate how to get in touch with you for accommodations. Interviewing, so provide different formats as what was said before. So job shadow, work trials, activities or assessments, so that autistic individuals can demonstrate their skills instead of talking about them. Provide questions beforehand. That allows time to process the information and being able to give you what's needed. Be mindful of differences. So eye contact can sometimes be difficult, and that literal thinking piece we talked about. So abstract questions might not work here. So again, going back to being concrete, clear, and concise. For onboarding, as stated before too, appoint a buddy or a mentor and use a job coach. So that's a point person that can help settle in autistic employees, and a job coach can work with both staff and autistic employees. And utilize the communication method and style that best suits the individual. And if you're unsure, ask, see what works best for them. In retention, ongoing check-ins and performance feedback, just what was stated before, these are very essential. So saying the good, bad, and the ugly. Don't exclude them because they are autistic. The format of how you provide feedback might have to be tweaked, but they should have that information and be included in the process as it stands for all employees. And if accommodations are present, check in on them. Make sure that they're still working or if they need adjusting. Unfortunately, I don't think we're going to have time for this example because I know we're at 10 minutes. But if anyone would like to go talk more about accommodations and those job supports, I am available. This is my contact information. Like Donald said, I am a job coach, so I can also kind of go further into that information. And Geneva Center is available for consultation service and workshops and job coaching. So thank you very much again for hosting me. Please reach out anytime. Donald has our information. And I'd be more than happy if anyone will help anyone if you'd like to contact me directly. Thank you.
Thank you very much for all of that, Shar. Your specific statement about some of the using turns of phrases or figures of speech struck a chord with me because I've been in that position before, where I've been working with someone who used a figure of speech and it threw them off entirely. So point well taken. Next, I would like to welcome Natalie McCartney. Natalie is an outreach coordinator with the CNIB, and she will be speaking about blind and low vision to us. And I see she's already got her slide deck up and ready to go. So Natalie, the floor is yours.
Yeah, thank you. Like Donald said, I'm Natalie McCartney, and I work with the Canadian National Institute for the Blind Come to Work program. And so I'll be talking a little bit today about sight loss in the workplace. So just to start off, a little bit about us. Founded in 1819, the CNIB is a not-for-profit organization driven to change what it means to be blind today. And we do that through a series of innovative programs and powerful advocacy to empower people impacted by blindness to live their dreams and to tear down barriers to inclusion. So we run a couple of different programs, anything from advocacy to career support to literacy technology programs, and our programs cover all ages and all ranges of abilities. And so to get into a little bit about myths and misconceptions about blindness, I'm going to go through a little true or false quiz, and you guys can play in your head. So starting off, the use of the term blind means having absolutely no vision at all. This is false. When we talk about blindness, we talk about a spectrum. So people who are blind can absolutely have no vision at all, or they can have most of their vision. Some individuals might only have their peripheral vision, or they might only have some light perception. So every individual is different when it comes to their level of vision. And then when we look at is every person that is blind uses Braille? This is also false. Individuals who are blind can use a variety of different accommodations or kind of features of text in order to communicate. So while some may use Braille, others will use large print or even electronic formats combined with a screen reader. And then individuals with vision loss can only be massage therapists. This is also false. In our Come to Work program, our talent pool or program participants are in a range of careers, anything from social service workers, teachers, accountants, lawyers, bank tellers, customer service representatives. So it's really up to the individual what they want to do, and people who are blind can essentially do all careers. And so to get into a little bit of kind of tips for the hiring process, and then later on I'll talk about interviewing and on the job itself. But beginning with the recruiting process. The recruiting process is your first opportunity to make sure you open the job to the best possible range of candidates, and that includes people who are blind. So it's really important to start off to advertise jobs where people who are blind can access them. So you want to post job applications to websites that work with screen reader or magnifier technology and ensure that material for candidates is available in accessible formats. And so you can look to see there are different levels of AODA compliance, as well as the CNIB itself offers a service called Frontier Accessibility, which is able to check the accessibility of your website for free. And then you also want to make sure that all staff involved in selection and interviews understand equality and diversity, as well as when you're posting the actual jobs, you want to consider actual requirements versus nice to have. So some jobs may say on the listing requires a driver's license, whereas the actual duties of the job just means you'll have to have the ability to travel to different job sites. So you might want to consider using that phrasing instead if the person's able to use public transit, taxi, Uber, anything of the sort. And then also consider adding an equal opportunities or disability statement in your job ad to outline your commitment to inclusion, diversity, equity, and accessibility. I know talking with program participants, they're a lot more excited and intrigued to apply to jobs with those statements because they feel like they're going to face less barriers in the recruiting and hiring process. And then to get into interview tips. So after you shortlist candidates, you're going to want to ask applicants if there's anything they need to give them a fair interview. And so if they require any accommodations, they should be able to tell you at this stage so you can make any reasonable adjustment. It's important not to make assumptions. Like we talked about before, not all people who are blind read Braille or require a brightly lit room. So make sure you ask the candidates themselves if they require adjustments. If you're doing an in-person interview, it's a good idea to keep the room free of clutter and obstacles, especially on the floor. So if the individual uses a white cane or a guide dog, it makes the physical space easier to navigate, as well as you probably can offer the candidate if a guide to the interview room and within the building. And during the interview, it's really important to focus on the candidate's abilities rather than their blindness. They will be able to explain what tools or assistive technology or accommodations they may need to complete the task and meet the job requirements. And so talking a little bit about blindness at work, working with someone who is blind or partially sighted isn't really much different than working with anyone else. With the help of a few accommodations and technologies, people who are blind can work 100% independently. And the cost of hiring an employee who is blind is about the same as hiring a person who is sighted. And then to get into some of these accommodations, I can't talk about all of them, obviously, because every individual is different. But most workplace accommodations are often very simple and inexpensive. And like I've been reiterating throughout, it's important to talk to the employee or applicant about what accommodations they need specifically. So one common accommodation is assistive technology. which makes computers and smartphones accessible to someone who is blind. So you have a computer screen reader or computer magnifying technology that you can add to whatever computer you use, or a lot of computers or smartphones have built-in accessibility features. So I gave the example of VoiceOver on iOS or TalkBack on Android. And then, as you know, most computers or apps offer the ability for the individual to magnify them already built in. So I'm sure we've probably all zoomed in on a Google Chrome tab or a Microsoft Word document. You want to give documents in advance to someone who is blind in their preferred format. Again, whether they use Braille, large print, electronic versions. And yeah, provide any of those in advance. And then you can also do, if you're using a Microsoft Office suite, it's really easy to run an accessibility check on your documents to make sure that any Word, PowerPoint, anything of the sort can be read by a screen reader or a magnifier. As well as if any presentations are taking place, like videos or PowerPoints, it's a good idea for the presenter to describe what is on the screen. And then whether it's in a group setting or one-on-one, it's important to ask first before you read aloud any printed material or provide assistance of any kind. And just in general, to finish off, talking about creating an inclusive culture. Well, resources are available to ensure the company is accessible. You really want to focus also in creating an environment where everyone feels included. So it's not specifically about different accommodations or such, but shifting a collective mindset away from the notion that accessibility is something just for people with disabilities, to the idea that accessibility, inclusion, and diversity can benefit everyone in a work culture. And then here, just a little bit on CNIB's Come to Work program. So we seek to connect job seekers who are blind or partially sighted with employers who want to discover the full potential of candidates' talents. So we work based on three main pillars. The first being cultivating our talent pool. So those who are participants who are looking for a job or currently working, and we work to support them in all areas of their job search as well as their employment. And then we also work with partner employers. We're able to do awareness presentations or seminars like this, as well as if they're interested, share their job postings with our talent pool, and then support them in terms of accommodations or accessibility on throughout the hiring process if they choose to hire from our talent pool. And then just to finish off, we have a mentorship program, which we connect volunteer mentors one-on-one with our talent pool. Yeah, and so if you have any questions, you can find a list of CNIB programs just at cnib.ca, as well as if you want to learn more about blindness in the workplace or have any questions about opportunities to work or collaborate as a partner employer, you can email me at natalie.mccartney@cnib.ca or come to work at cnib.ca. Thank you.
Thank you for that very informative presentation, Natalie. You are very precise. That was 10 minutes exactly. I'm impressed. So thank you for joining us. And we're going to move on to our final presenters of the afternoon. So I would like to welcome Pam Romasanta, who is the Employment Services Supervisor at the Bob Rumble Canadian Centre of Excellence for the Deaf and Hard of Hearing, and Sherlina Newell, who is a residential counselor of new hires who are deaf working in the manufacturing sector. And once again, it's in the name, so not surprisingly, they will be speaking to us about job seekers or employees who are deaf or hard of hearing. So I see you've already got your slide deck up. I'm going to leave things to you.
Thank you for having us today. We're really excited to be here. First off, I'm just going to start to give a little bit of background about our organization. The Bob Rumble Canadian Centre of Excellence for the Deaf. We are a unique, one-of-a-kind centre providing services to the deaf, blind, and hard of hearing community. We employ over 300 employees, and over 50% of them are deaf or hard of hearing. In 1960, the late Reverend Bob Rumble opened doors to a barrier-free environment for deaf children and adults. From its starting point as a community recreational facility, our organization has now expanded to include residential facilities in Toronto and Milton, the Ontario Camp for the Deaf in Parry Sound, and the Bob Rumble Home for the Deaf in Barrie. We offer extensive programming for all ages, including services for mental health, developmental, newcomers, day programs, and educational programs, which include ASL instruction. Our services also help to support people we serve. Many of them are employed by our driving range, our community gardens, and other on-site programs. We're a multi-site service organization with multiple funders across government sectors. And I'll hand off to Charlena.
Pam, I don't see Charlena here, so you may need to step in.
And I'm just gonna raise my hand. So Charlena, she's actually listed as Zoom user.
Oh.
And we can go backwards a little bit with the help of our ASL interpreter, Heather. She's going to introduce Charlena. Charlena is in the Zoom user box and Charlena's sign name. Can see Charlena now?
Yes, we can see her, but we can't hear the interpreter who is speaking for her. So Heather, I see that you're speaking, but there's no volume.
We cannot hear you, Heather. No volume, Heather. Not yet. It could be in the Zoom settings. Would you mind, Heather, if you log out and rejoin? Would that maybe work? Sorry, everyone, about that technical glitch we have. So I'll actually continue just for a moment. Part of deaf awareness is that if a person like me knows a little bit of ASL, I wouldn't interpret. So that's also a part of the presentation, is that interpreters, they need to be qualified. And that's a part of our accommodations. I'm actually, in the interest of time, I'll do this slide for Charlena. So if you all gave a read for the slide, it says, I can't hear you, but you can. If I can figure you out, how to talk to you, but you can't figure out how to talk to me, why do they call me disabled? So that's a common experience. Heather, can you try to put your mute off and volume? No, you can't. Okay, so we'll make a do. I'll try I'll try my best. I was just saying I'm not an interpreter, but I will try. So we were mentioning on this screen that it's a common experience that most deaf people have within the deaf community, is that it's the notion that they are not disabled, they are deaf and cannot hear, but nothing else sets them back from doing anything that anybody else can. The deaf unemployment rate in Canada, only 20% of Canadians are fully employed. 42 of them are listed as underemployed, and 38% are unemployed. This indicates approximately 32% higher unemployment rate in the deaf community as the rest of the population. Common areas which employers have told us reasons why they haven't employed the deaf community is they either thought the cost was too high or they thought it would be too complex to integrate them into the mainstream employee population. I'll give everybody a moment to review this. Charlena was actually going to present this slide and it would have been more impactful. So if you can read this, this is what deaf or hard of hearing people feel when hearing people speak to them. It is hard work. There's many cues that we can use to remember when we speak to individuals from the deaf community. It's pausing, taking our time, being clear. If we have access to an ASL interpreter, that definitely helps. And we'll review some of our accommodations and suggestions in the next coming slides. Accessibility and accommodations. So providing an ASL interpreter, today we have Heather providing us with some support. Closed captioning, subtitles, and transcripts. The use of plain language. Technical support for communications. Remembering the line of sight. And to note, if two people, whether it be two deaf individuals or a deaf and hearing person are having communications, and if it's in person, not to walk across that line of sight, not to block the line of sight because it would interrupt the communications. Often for presentations, we would make sure that if the person has a clear line of sight for the presentation board, that would definitely help as well. Visual safety lighting, sound reduction, and convex mirrors. Charlena has experience as a job coach, onboarding and training new employees who are deaf in the manufacturing sector. Some of these suggestions, the lighting, sound reduction, and convex mirrors, were all implemented within one factory plant. It ended up being very impactful and successful for the new hires, that they were able to safely integrate into their workplace. Roundtables for discussion to make sure everyone's included and everybody is able to see. And again, from Charlena's experience, job coaching, mentoring, ASL and deaf culture employer education has helped with different employers that we've worked with. We were actually able to train some of the supervisors and mentors to learn ASL, and they were able to integrate it at the workplace with the deaf employees, which increased the socialization and job retention. We're happy to report from 2018, Charlena worked with 6 individuals from the deaf community and helped to onboard and train them. And until now, 4 of them remain fully employed. We continue to work with that employer to look at different accommodations to continue to improve and hopefully start a mentoring program as well. A little bit about deaf culture, the awareness and etiquette that we should all know. All deaf people are different. They have different needs, different ways of communicating. ASL is the most common form of communication. And the etiquette, ask the deaf person, what is their preferred way of communicating? Don't make any assumptions if a person uses sign language, reads lips, uses their voice or a hearing aid. All people are different. Awareness, deaf people are not disabled. Do not use historical negative labels such as hearing impaired, deaf dumb, deaf mute. Deaf and hard of hearing people have the right to choose what they wish to be called, either as a group or on an individual basis. Awareness that American Sign Language, ASL, is not a universal language. Just as spoken language has many forms, dialects, and local variations, so does sign language. Facial expressions are very important to add emphasis to a conversation. Non-use of facial expressions keeps a very monotone conversation, just as Heather's giving a great demonstration for us. When communicating with a deaf person, make sure to have the person's attention before communicating. Speak clearly, repeat if necessary, don't shout, and eye contact is very important. If you're having difficulty communicating with a deaf person without an interpreter, try writing, gesturing, just don't give up. Awareness with interpreter support, book well in advance. We like to usually say 2 weeks or more. There never seems to be enough interpreters in the world. So we want to make sure that important events like today, we book in advance. We also provide content prior to meetings. When an interpreter is supporting, continue to have the conversation with the deaf person. Ask the deaf person if they have a preference with the interpreter. Interpreters have to have appropriate credentials to be able to interpret. And finally, deaf with a capital D is a culture versus deaf, the word, which describes a medical term of hearing loss. The deaf community takes pride in their identity, social beliefs, behaviors, history, art, values. The primary language of the deaf community is sign language. Please make sure to ask, respect, and acknowledge if the individual identifies that they are from the deaf community. And finally, deaf people can do anything that hearing people can do, except hear.
Well, thank you for that, Pam and Charlena. Despite the technical difficulties, you got everything in just in time. So we appreciate that. I don't know, Isabel or Chris, if either of you would like to close things out, but you are certainly welcome to.
Hi, Donald. It's Isabel here. I'm not sure if we've still got Chris on the line. He may have been pulled out, but as the program director for Careers Now, I want to thank everyone on the panel for their time today. It was incredibly informative. We're going to take this information, we've recorded it, as you know, share it out with Food and Beverage Ontario members, and equally important, share it with the employers that are part of the Careers Now program, which is an initiative that's connecting job seekers with businesses across the province. I know this information will be helpful to employers. We need to connect the groups, people with disabilities and deaf people with businesses that have a wide variety of jobs available across all skill sets. And it's an opportunity. Donald and I have been talking about this for some time, and it's great to see this first webinar realized. And I consider it a privilege to work with all of you and also with Donald in the pilot that we're leading to, again, make those connections real between employers and people with disabilities and those that are deaf and hard of hearing. So thank you very much for your time today.
Thank you, Isabel. Take care, everybody.
Thank
Enjoy
you so
your
much,
afternoon.
everyone. Thank you.
Thank you, everyone.
Bye-bye.
Thank you. Have a good evening.
Thank you.
Isabel, I've given you back the host.
Oh, great work, Donald. That was really super. I'm going to send an email out to everyone on the panel. That was like truly informative.
Yeah, they did a good job. It's too bad the interpreter's microphone wasn't working.
I know. That was funny. I was sending her private messages, but I'm not sure she was picking them up. But I suggest sometimes it's just the volume, right? Like if you're used to being on mute all the time.
Yeah, I mean, she wasn't muted on our end, so it may be sometimes what the computers do, and I've had this happen a number of times. They'll select the wrong speakers or the wrong microphone to use, right? So you need to check that. If you don't know how to check it, it's honestly, it's something I didn't know that was going to be the case during their presentation. So I didn't think to see if the interpreter could speak or we could hear her. So yeah, that's maybe a bit of an oversight on my part, but